So let's talk about one of the stranger, more unexpected moments in horror movie history, the so-called beef between Rob Zombie and John Carpenter. Now, when you think of rivalries in Hollywood, you might picture actors fighting over roles, directors clashing with producers, or maybe even studio executives battling over budgets. But this story? It was a pretty short-lived but surprisingly spicy moment between two very different horror legends, Rob Zombie, the shock rock musician turned filmmaker, and John Carpenter, the man who practically defined modern horror with Halloween back in 1978. This whole saga starts in the mid-2000s. Dimension Films decided they wanted to reboot Carpenter's classic Halloween. And if you've been following Hollywood long enough, you know that remakes are often touchy subjects, especially when the original film is not only iconic, but responsible for creating an entire subgenre. Carpenter's Halloween wasn't just another slasher flick. It basically set the tone for the slasher boom of the 80s. Michael Myers, The Shape, stalking the suburbs of Haddonfield, the eerie score, the slow burn tension, all of that is Carpenter. It's the DNA of modern horror. So when the studio tapped Rob Zombie to take the reins, it was bold. Zombie wasn't a typical Hollywood director. He came from music. A guy who fronted White Zombie and then built a solo career out of horror-themed shock rock. By the time Halloween came his way, he'd already directed films like House of 1,000 Corpses and The Devil's Rejects, gritty, violent, disturbing movies that felt like grindhouse cinema filtered through heavy metal. He had his own voice, and it was definitely not subtle. Zombie himself has said he didn't want to just remake Halloween shot for shot. He wanted to expand it, reimagine it, and especially dig into Michael Myers' backstory. That was the key difference. In Carpenter's original, Michael is almost this unknowable force. He's the boogeyman, no explanation needed. You don't know why he kills. You don't know why he's unstoppable. He's just evil, pure and simple. Carpenter liked it that way. To him, Michael was terrifying because he was a mystery. But Zombie saw things differently. He wanted to explore Michael's childhood, show the abuse, the trauma, the gradual unraveling of this kid into the monster we all know. He wanted to take audiences into the world that shaped Michael Myers. His Halloween became part remake, part prequel. Now here's where the friction begins. Out of respect, Zombie reached out to John Carpenter before he dove into the project. And according to Zombie, Carpenter was very cold in that conversation. Zombie described it like Carpenter didn't really care and just told him, essentially, go make it your own. Do whatever you want. To Zombie, that felt dismissive, like one of his idols wasn't giving him any warmth, support, or guidance. For years, that was Zombie's version of events, and a lot of people took it at face value, because Carpenter has always had this reputation of being blunt, maybe even a little grumpy. He's not the Hollywood schmoozer type. He doesn't sugarcoat when asked why he was involved in a project. He's been known to say things like, "I'm here because they're paying me." He's a straight shooter, and sometimes that comes off as cold. But then came 2016. Carpenter was speaking to film students at the New York Film Academy, and the subject of Zombie came up. And Carpenter didn't hold back. He basically said that Zombie had lied about that phone call years earlier. From Carpenter's perspective, he wasn't cold at all. He thought he had been supportive, telling Zombie, "This is your movie now. Make it your own. Don't worry about me." And then he went further. He said he couldn't understand why Zombie had misrepresented him, and he expressed that frustration in, let's just say, very colorful language. And while he was at it, Carpenter also let his feelings be known about Zombie's remake. He said he didn't like it because it explained too much. To Carpenter, the scariest part of Michael Myers was his lack of explanation, the idea that he was just a force of nature, evil with no origin. By giving him a detailed backstory, Carpenter felt Zombie's film stripped away the mystique and weakened what made Michael so frightening in the first place. So now we had what fans started calling a beef. Zombie had told the story one way. Carpenter shot back years later saying it wasn't true, and along the way he trashed Zombie's creative choices. And when Carpenter called him a piece of shit in frustration, the internet ran wild with it.
He lied about me. He said I was very cold to him when he told me I was going to, and that he was going to make it. Nothing could be further from the truth. I said, make it your own movie, man. This is yours now. Don't worry about me. I was incredibly supportive. Why that piece of shit lied, I don't know. He had no reason to.
Suddenly, this wasn't just a difference of opinion, it was a feud. But here's the twist. For all the noise it made, this beef didn't last long at all. Shortly after Carpenter's comments went public, Zombie reached out to him directly, and when they actually got on the phone and talked, the whole thing dissolved almost instantly. Zombie said he was surprised Carpenter had even been upset, because he never meant it the way it came across. He explained his side, Carpenter explained his, and in about a minute they both agreed to just put it behind them. Looking back, it feels almost silly how quickly it all ended, considering how loud the headlines were when Carpenter first went off. But it also says something about both men. Carpenter is blunt and doesn't care who he offends if he feels strongly about something. Zombie is passionate but ultimately respectful toward the legends who came before him. Once they actually spoke directly, it turned out there wasn't really as much bad blood as the public thought. Still, it's fascinating because it highlights two very different philosophies of horror. Carpenter believes in mystery and leaving things unsaid, and creating a shape that lurks in the dark with no rhyme or reason. Zombie believes in digging into the darkness, showing how monsters are made, exploring the ugly underbelly of humanity. Both approaches have value. Both approaches have fans, and when you put those two worldviews side by side, sparks are bound to fly. Now, for context, Zombie went on to make Halloween 2 as well, which leaned even further into his style. That sequel was divisive, to say the least, but it's also gained something of a cult following. And Carpenter? He later returned to the franchise as executive producer and composer on the 2018 Halloween, which served as a direct continuation of his original, wiping away all the sequels and remakes. So in a strange way, both men got what they wanted. Zombie got to leave his mark on the franchise with a pair of films that were fully his own, and Carpenter got to reclaim the mythic, mysterious Michael Myers he'd always envisioned, bringing him back to the screen with a new trilogy that carried his stamp of approval. When you step back, the beef really boils down to a misunderstanding, amplified by the media, and fueled by two very different artistic visions. It wasn't some long-running feud or bitter rivalry. It was just a moment, a clash between generations, between mystery and explanation, between subtlety and brutality. And once they actually cleared the air, it evaporated almost instantly. And honestly, I kind of love that, because it shows how even legends can get caught up in misunderstandings, and how quickly things can be fixed with a simple conversation. At the end of the day, I admire both of these filmmakers. John Carpenter gave us the blueprint, the skeleton key to modern horror, and his work will always stand as foundational. Rob Zombie brought his own raw, heavy, and unapologetic voice into the mix, and whether you love or hate his Halloween films, they are unmistakably his. They both contributed something important. So yes, there was a beef. It was loud, it was colorful, it gave us headlines, but it ended almost as quickly as it started. And today, it's just one more story in the larger tapestry of horror history. And if you ask me, I'm just glad they patched it up, because the real horror story would be living in a world where two icons of the genre never buried the hatchet. And hey, if Michael Myers himself ever weighed in on all this, he'd probably just stand there in silence.